Okay, we're going to look at another oopart here. I forgot exactly what number we're at. I should have double checked before I started. For I know we went through the 30s there up into it, and I think we're at 38. Although a lot of these I'll show multiples in each one, so hell, it's got to be in the 70s and so on. Although I've even done other videos where I'll show exact singulars like the Nebra sky disk, or I'll do one on the Antikythera mechanism in a whole group of things like what the hell is this all about, and so on. Today we're going to look at stuff that's found up in the Columbian rainforest, and when they got down to it, they started going through some trash and everything, and like they do archaeology, they keep going until they don't find any remnants whatsoever, and in doing so, they actually found something that looks like it's very much out of place. In fact, again, we're looking at a whole group of things. So let's take a look at this and see the difference of this. This is a stone, I think it's called lemonite. It's kind of like a jade stone, and really actually it's strong or has a Mohs scale. It's very similar to granite. You see all these people that are attached onto here, and they have their little stomachs covered by their hands, and symbols that we've seen all over the place and all over the world, and scratched in little things. And people talk about, well, this was a ceremonial knife because it gets kind of pointy on one end, and they could have held it like this. There's a hole in the middle of it that's cut, and it's kind of squared off. That's weird. The little handle idea would have broke off real easy. So if you're talking about ceremonial, you're probably talking about never even used in a ceremony and associated with a burial. Although, if there's any body that's associated with this whatsoever, in fact, a few different finds that are associated around it in the same area, but not directly it, aren't associated with the dead body, for they don't find any bones or anything. In fact, teeth whatsoever, it seemed. So here's this stone, and of course there's some veins running through it, but apparently they never chose that, and that would have caused a kind of messed up spark right there whenever they tried to do so. Now, right near this spot, and in fact, these hikers that are these archaeologists that are supposed to be going back up to it again. In fact, why I watched this other video, because I'm like, okay, show me what you got, and all they really showed me is what was found in this area, and they're going to go back up to it, and then there's no linking video, for it just goes off in this other way and ends, and I'm like, where's your next video? And there isn't one. And it's from like 7 years ago, and I'm like, maybe somebody else put it out, try to put in some keywords. Anyhow, associated with this site here, or on the way to it, is this giant boulder here. And it's got a cleave point in it. And these geologists looked at it and they go, yeah, this is extremely hard rock too. Well, they look at this facet that's been done into it, and it looks like it's been done with a giant type saw. Like somebody would have taken something like a tree cutting type of saw, but made more to do something like this, like they say in Egypt and all those type of things. And it's made this exactly straight line in it. In fact, it has an arch and a depth to it that goes around. And the guy looked at it and he goes, well, how often does it rain here now? And then the guy was like, well, now currently it rains about this much per year. I think it was like 245 days out of the year it'll have a chance of having some rain. And so basically the time they were there, there's a 50-50 chance of it raining for a while. But then shortly afterwards, of course, you'll never know it rained again, except for it's humid as hell and you can't breathe. If it happens in the morning time and burns off, then you get that steam coming out of the forest, and they talk about that crap. Anyhow, over on the left-hand side, they also notice that it looks like there's some little graffiti drawn up here, just a slight drawing, and really can't make it out. But the guy was saying it's here's a little guy and his arm, and then this line, and a couple of things that really look like there's scratches done into it. And it would have to have been done with a harder stone than what this is to even make the little scratchy lines in it. And there's no reason for the idea, but the oopart here is just on the way to the original site, and it's like, well, if guys were doing this, what it looks like they would have done is put a pin in here, and just out of view, maybe there's a piece up here and another one here, and they would put wedges, or actually plant wedges somehow into it that were dried, and get them driven into that situation, and then they wet them and they'd start swelling up, and then put other chisels into it, perhaps even heating this rock up with a bunch of fire going across the seam, and then hit it a few times. And if the vibration, the way I understand it, goes all the way through the object, it'll make a straightish line. In fact, where you get the fact where it goes off is whenever that vibration doesn't continue through it. Sometimes that's caused by veins and things like going through the rock that you're not looking for and do not want. But other than that, that's where you get this cleaved off point situation. Well, there's no people right around the area that are really associated with, much later even, making faceted stone and using this type of method. So that's just a new part on the way to this deal. But what was found here before? That's really what we're looking at. So what we're kind of getting a glimpse at here is this rounded off hard rock stone. It's almost like a jade, or again as hard as granite, and there's these drilled socket holes that are all in it. Now what's weird is over and above that there's a little connective hole that goes to each one of them, and to a mother hole, if you will, that comes out the side on some of these guys. And some are made into flutes, and you can blow into them and then put your fingers over to them and stuff like that. We'll look at one of them and everything, but just to be able to make something is smooth off of this. And they've dated these artifacts we're looking at 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. Somebody said BC in the comments of the thing that I went off of, but I think it's 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. Still, either way, it doesn't fit their exact narrative. For again, what they supposedly did was go down through and then found chipped rock and things that they could tell had been manipulated with people. So they went deeper and deeper into this, and then they always go a few inches past it stops, and then all of a sudden they run into things like this. And they're like, what the hell is this? So you can see how they're worked and so on. In fact, here's another example of one of those flutish type ideas that you're looking at here. And let me see if I can just go back just a hair. For I had something I want to say about that flute. And so if I let it carry him down a little bit and see if I can catch it here at the right time. Squeeze this down just a little bit. You can see those holes across the top of it. Supposedly, I can't see it and don't have a picture on this one. There's a hole in the side of it too. And those connect to a common chamber that each one of these holes here go down to. Alright? Now there's 5 holes there, but you would hold this thing in your palm like this with your thumb extra, and the side of your thumb, this one that's chipped off in the upper left hand corner that you can see, and also rounded more than the others are squared, was where your thumb would go. And you could half do a hole with that too, getting things in the whole chamber. Thing is, and I haven't verified this, but they say that it's the same scale that people use today, and with the combination here you can cover over an octave and a half and so on. So like a flutophone when you're a kid. You look at the picture here and it shows somebody with this docked off and haircut. It almost looks like he has a little part in his hair right here, and they say no, well, looking at it, that's cut into it. That's what was mentioned in the deal. But there's a headdress here that's incredibly huge, and so it looks like they're wearing this crown thing, and then over behind it is a staircase looking effect for each one, and then these big snakish or hair curlicues that might be as big as a big bouffant hairdo. Kind of strange looking in the way that those things end, and that little rotted end that a lot of people would say that's filigree type stuff from much later and but again, this is found at those times, and you look at how this thing is polished off at this situation, and the guy looking at wasn't able to handle the object that was supposedly talking about this. It's always the effect, isn't it? But he was looking at it and he goes, man, to make something like that, and you can see, and of course taking pictures of it and then zooming in like this, you'd say, well, man, as smoothed off as this thing and the edging off of it, there's no way they edge these things. And saying that they're 4,000 to 6,000 BC with the plant matter around them, and it doesn't look like anybody dug a hole to make this through. It's the way that it was. That they don't have the technology, first of all, to even carve this stone in this way, because we're not attributing anybody in this area to have a hardened bronze type situation that it would have to do, and it still wouldn't do a great job in it. You take something better than that, and something would have to be definitely harder than this stone, and so on. But then if you were even to carve it and everything, it would have its jagged edges and it's so on. And then every little niche of everything on this has been all smoothed off, like they'd gone through various forms of sandpaper and da-da-da and emery cloths and this, that, and the other, and they're like, no, no, in fact, we were going to ask you if you could make this type of thing. And he goes, man, if I had a grinding wheel and this, that, and the other, and da-da-da, and then let's see the drilling points. Man, I wonder how many I have to go through without not breaking, making those 5 holes in the connective situation. But it could be done. And he goes, now we're just going to give you basically what's an old fire starter with a bow and this, that, and the other, and you can go find your own little rocks. Right, and you can try to primitively make things and stuff, but you have to go with what fabrics they say that were at the time and this, that, and the other, even to put some kind of dust of some rock that you make somehow to make an emery thing. And the guy's shaking his head and everything, is there's no way, and the dude tries to go on and he goes, you lost me way back at whatever. It's kind of funny to watch and everything, and everybody says, oh, that's kind of set up, but you don't find people in the comments turning around and go, I work rocks and da 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 da, and try to refute what the guy is saying very much at all. So there's a variance in this too, but definitely they know there was people there that were definitely primitive at this time and not being able to pull off something like this. But then there's this ooparts of these people that apparently are like popcorn, showing up and having some type of advanced stuff that doesn't really quite go with their ideals, if you will. So you find something like this and you could say, well, this thing, I can see the scratches in the surface of it still extra, and so it's not polished like that other things were that we're looking at, and some coming up that even blow this away, attributed to the same little grouping. But what you're seeing here is something that looks like a bug-eyed fish type of creature, and declimating through the shallow here that's here, an underworld situation, and a person that's here. And a lot of people would say this is upside down here, and this is supposed to be the fish, and this is supposed to be the person that's here over. And he's kind of bent over looking like he's trying to make bread or something like that, or his hands are washing in the river and this, that, and the other. And they made it out of a darker stone, and this is supposed to be associated with a burial, but there's no burial there. It looks like they're ceremonial objects that's done in this way. In fact, this guy looks like it had been hit right here real hard and made a crack all the way through it. In fact, it's one of those things that looks like they went through the trouble of making it, cracked the thing, and put it in this ceremonial offering situation, like a lot of people do with pottery and all these other types of things later, and it has this same type of connotation. But then again, that isn't associated even with this type of people and everything, and sacrifice in a much different way, huh? But so when you look at this thing, it's an oddity in itself, and you'd say something of this level, you could say, well, they were trying to polish it off real good, but understand this is all made from bas relief. This sticks up much higher than the stuff that's around it. So like the Sumerians and all that stuff, they took the wall to where it's almost flat and left the ridge up and formed it out of that. Yeah, so how'd they make it off of it? And even just left that amount of scratches, right? That would be amazing, wouldn't it? Well, I think it kind of is, and it sure doesn't fit anybody's model for a time, and people will be able to pull this off. And sure, you see stuff later, but again, this is 4 to 6,000 BC. And you compare the quality of this to the others, and they say, well, maybe because of the ceremonial rite, they only had a certain amount of time and could get it to this point. And the guy said, if with this primordial idea of buffing and doing everything that you could do, how long would it take to do something like that? And he went, man, it would take a year, maybe more. I'd have to experiment with trying to make the sandpaper and stuff that would try to get this thing smooth, because you can see, other than the deeper scratches, which didn't get taken out quite, that all the rest of it's pretty much got a sheen on it. Kind of two different levels too. So they may have known, and they say, that they were going to break it there at the center part of it. So that shows some signs of not quite being finished and not quite very much, done. But hey, let's look at this thing that a lot of people are saying that shows some type of witchcraft and all kinds of things. For there's this embryonic disc that they've found here, and this is another one of those things that can be set on the alien shelf, by the way. So let's look at this thing here. Here's a drawing of it, but here's the actual thing itself. And I make the comment down here at the bottom. What you see is on the left, mom and dad, and hopefully somebody can. You look at this, and even though they look somewhat like big fat frog people, they've got this connotation with them. You can tell that's a male and a female. And a lot of people have made the comments that, hey, right up here, this is a female, perhaps a genitalia, and then a male's. You'll be able to look at it a little better. And this is an embryo of what, like most creatures and humans look like whenever they're born. And as you go around this, it goes around for a first few, and then it keeps going around and it goes around here. Now there are these people that have this egg-headed type shape and weird eyes way out on them, and people are like, oh, that's grays and this, that, and well, take a little closer look, let it go by for a second. But in this fact, you can tell that that one up top is a female here, and this is a male here, and the picture above that, which we'll be able to look at as it comes down through its casting or movement, is actually a female holding a child. And so everybody said this is some weird thing, and it goes with the cycles of the moon and so on, and we'll get into that a little bit. But understand that this disc here is made out of that same material, and in doing so, it's cut off a wafer, like if you were to have a tree and then slice off a wafer of the tree, and it ended up being flat like a plate and being able to go through this. And it said it's not perfectly round, and nobody's taking this thing and rolling it across the ground to check it out and seeing its little wobble. The guy that was doing this thing, he turned around and said the only way that it could look like this and try to get as big a circle at the time is if you give me a compass and this, that, and the other. And he goes, no compass. Well, the middle part of it, right off the bat, has to be a hole drill saw. And it might even been one that sleeved with another one, so a little bigger, and the first one went all the way through, and the second just did a little gouge, and they stopped at a point, and he goes, no, 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 hole saw. In fact, the whole outside could be done with a big hole. No, 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 no. Well, they could have tried to make it round, but then they're going to have to roll it on the ground like some old woodwright would be doing to try to make a wheel and make it as round as possible and not go wah, wah, wah and do things like that. And you could go through it and find the big heavy spots and then work the other side and all that and everything, like you'd have to go through in this situation. But this thing is like a giant coin. So it doesn't make any sense. Let's cast down and let it see just a little bit more of it here. And so whenever you get a chance to look at it, here's this zygote situation a lot of people have said, and it comes all the way up through here. Now, there's this line that comes through here, goes around that middle, and then runs up here, and it has an arrow onto it. And a lot of people have said, well, past that point is, again, a depiction more through that, but it shows a zygote type form, and there's 8 of them. And of course, you can maybe see that it comes right around to the end, and then ta-da, there's Mr. Bill and Mrs. Bill's little kid, Little Bill. Oh no! And they've got their mouth like that. And then, well, where's the 9th one? Well, once it goes to the 9th moon, that's whenever you have the baby. And where do they have the baby? Well, here's the mom and the dad and the mom, and there she is holding apparently the baby, right? So this is a female laid back, with the breasts and her arms coming out. This is supposedly a male genitalia. People have tried to make a lot out of this. Also, it spoked like a wheel and almost looked like a zodiacal situation and everything else. And man, if they would have made it up, what the dating on this goes way back when, and it just makes no sense. Now, the funny thing about here is it doesn't even have that scratches on it at all. It spent some time being polished up to the level that it is. By hand, every single little spot on this, to the point that there are no tool marks that are visible on it whatsoever, even taking a camera and getting all in, and then boom, and then zooming that image up and trying to find. And there are places that swell down and up and they can see in the bas relief, but it's all polished so much. And they tell you, this guy said, well, that's almost like some kind of laser precision, or I might be able to make something like that in a CNC machine and try to make a replica of it. But he's like, you're not listening to me. We called you here to see if you could make this right now. And he said, well, I could maybe if I had the grinder and everything else and stuff and all these deals, but it's going to be a hell of a thing. And if you try to pinch me down to where I can't make it, it's got to be impossible. And he goes, well, actually, we're giving you the stuff that they attributed later whenever they're doing other things like this that's thousands of years later. And the guy just shakes his head again. He's way past the point. No, I'm not. What the hell? So here's another thing that's interesting. Over here at the right, you find a 3-holed little object. It looks like a 3-holed flute, but the first hole and the last hole are people, and then the middle hole doesn't have a person into it. I've seen people that use this same object and a few others like it, and they say it's a multi-chambered smoking device, and that they were toking it up back then, and that it's not a flute or anything, that they would load each one and then cover each one but one, and then use each one individually like hits off weed, and the shaman would take 3 hits and then there you go, and that's good enough for him to do his thing. And I go, yeah, but these other people are saying they're flutes. In fact, the same thing was said about this, and it must be some kind of pipe. And then there's this jaguar-mouthed alligator-looking almost thing that's on it. I can never get a good enough picture to really get this glyphs that's on the side of it that almost from here look like it's on Roswell or some crap. But there are holes that are drilled in here, and then there's a little hole, and it's drilled into apparently the butt here down to a point and meets another line that must have come from the front of the mouth going all the way through this whole object. It's here, and it's made, and there's a multiple chamber, and they say, yeah, that's a flute, and it's tuned to these certain frequencies and stuff, and and I've never seen anybody blow through this thing that it even works like a flute. It's not a little chambered pipe or so on situation, but a guy said that he thought that there was a pipe. Another guy came back and said that he was a fife. The other guy questioned F-I-F-E or P-I-P-E. The guy said fife, a flute, but this size would have been high pitched and da-da-da-da-da. Funny thing is, it's got this little bitty drilled hole goes all the way through it, and they 2 meeting holes, which would have been a fantastic thing. And apparently, in this burial type situation, this thing was broken into pieces and all thrown in there, but all the pieces are there. They just take it, put it back together, and go, look like they just ceremonially made this badass thing, and maybe played the song with it, or did the hits and did the thing or whatever, and then broke it. Tell me what y'all think about this type stuff. Of course, the dating and stuff, it really doesn't go along with academia and wackademia. And of course, back then they didn't have some laser cutting device or something that would, even equal it in any way. Here's another one that's found with this. And so what you can kind of see here is it looks like a mother type thing. And she had these drilled in eyes set almost. Hopefully, well, it's just out of frame, huh? Great. Well, so it looks like that, and then of course at her shoulder and over here you can see these little drilled holes, and then a little face down below it. And a lot of people said different stuff about it. And one of the comments that I read, and I don't know if this is the guy, he doesn't have a PhD behind his name, and blah, 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 but he said this is supposed to represent a female, and then her baby that's inside of her, although it's cut in, and that's the half moon shape of the whole situation, with the arrow, and of course the female with the round thing and the arrow, and it goes on, and that's not associated with these people or not. But then it makes this blade, and that this would have been ceremonial, and maybe that they used it to cut the umbilical cord or something along that situation. In fact, that thing that's the crescent moon might be an umbilical cord, although it looks like it's wrapped around his neck. That doesn't look like a good idea. Or and speculation runs wild on situations like this. But then the dude that does this type of work, he goes, okay, so that material we were looking at. So here it is, like the flute and everything. We want you to try to make something like this. You can't use a modern grinder and so on. He goes, if I could use a modern grinder and get it to where it's sharp, it would take me perhaps years. I don't know what method I'm going to be able to come up with to even smooth it off to where it looks all polished up like this thing and all rounded off from its normally jagged appearance. And by the way, it's not sharpened in a way that it would ever cut an umbilical cord too, so it must be more symbolic than anything in reality. It comes to a point. And so you could have, killed somebody with it or some kind of crap, but then it doesn't, none of that thought fits the real concept of ideas, although there's sacred ceremonial daggers and so on, and this doesn't really fit with that. So there's a group of them, and of course people want to look at stuff like this and they go, well, you know what, it must have been aliens. And again, we got that box on a shelf that I've talked about a bunch, and maybe I'll make a little series, but I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to get you to believe in this situation. And what it does show is there was these people that had a lot of advanced things going on, even more advanced than you give the people at the time of building the pyramids. But we're talking about thousands of years earlier than that. It doesn't fit the model, and then they don't want to talk about it. And some of y'all probably have never even seen this stuff that was shown in this, and it's like, what goes on? Well, the archaeologists would, because it doesn't fit them all and they can't put other things together, they'd rather walk away from it. In fact, because of all of that situation, you don't find that they're doing too much digging and too much finding out. But the recent LiDAR that they've run through the jungle, and all of a sudden they go, here's this giant city almost the size of London in the 1800s, and it's, and we didn't even know any of it existed and stuff. And oh, here's this other area, and it's miles by miles and so on. People are just like, this could have been a couple 100,000 people living in this area, and we didn't even know it existed. And all of a sudden, it shows like what people look at the age of how the rainforests grow in, and they go, it wasn't necessarily like it was now. In fact, ecology was slightly different back then. But we haven't really took a bunch of the scientists that'll dig cores and get a sample and go, okay, well, it was a little different here and stuff. Why? Because we found a bunch of flowers, and this area doesn't have any kind of thing. In fact, it doesn't have enough rainfall to support that now. But looky here, look at all this pollen and all these type of things. And there's some tests, but people, of course, aren't putting data together and trying to grow that database in a formative way, because a lot of these things show up to be a new part and doesn't fit things, and then people ignore it. And I'm sure people don't want to, as an archaeologist, get into something that if you found something weird and they would go, that's great. Instead, they go, you're defunded. Peace.